Hi, and thanks for watching another instructional video for CSCI 1300. In this video, we will talk about the difference between structs and classes in C++. In C++, classes are privately held pieces of collected data stored into objects. With structs, however, we have publicly stored object data, where any function has access to the struct's interior contents without the buffer of a public section of functions. So you can think of like a class similar to, say, a bank vault or a security deposit box, where there's an employee or a series of employees that are related in that bank to accessing or updating the contents of that privately held piece of information stored in a vault. Classes in C++ generally have a public and a private section and are defined as we see on the left side of the screen. You will generally see three types of functions in your public section, including constructors to create objects either as default or parameterized by user input, accessors or mutators, which are public functions to access or update the contents of the private variables of an object, and a private section for private variables that store the attributes of an object securely. These private variables are only accessible via public functions defined in the public section. With structs in C++, we will define a struct similar to our class. Instead of using the word class, we will use the word struct and give it a name just like we would with a class. However, there is no public section or public-private, section difference between a struct and a class. A struct is by default public. Structs are basically syntactic sugar in C++ for a class that is public by default. Structs originated in the C language, and all variables within the struct are public, so there is no need for a public section. In order to accommodate backwards compatibility with C, structs usually only contain variables. The reason why is because class functions are not needed. Any function can access a struct's contents and scope directly. To give an example of how to access and update objects, in classes, previously what we would do is we'd have to declare an object or a collection of objects, such as an array of objects, and we would have to use a public function such as a get function like getName to access the name within, say, an object called person of the student class type. Here we either do it on a single object where we're accessing the name of a single person, or we have a class roster of some type of an array based on some size. We loop across it, and at every index, or I index, we are accessing an object at that location within the structure and using the .getName function, which is public, to access the contents of the privately stored information. In a struct, however, we can do this directly without using any kind of function. We can go directly to the name stored within the struct by using .name. So this is the basic difference between a struct and a class, is that in order to access this information, we'll access it directly rather than via a public function associated with that particular privately stored piece of information. The main reason why we do this is because structs are completely public by default, and so our public functions are not necessary in order to access the contents of the variable stored within an object or objects. That's all I've got for right now on the difference between structs and classes. So thanks for watching and happy coding.